Welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is Tom Mustin. Tom has been a TV news anchor and a reporter for more than 20 years. He's the son of a Navy admiral and has lived across the globe from Athens, Greece to London, England. He's used those experiences to become an award-winning journalist with a passion for helping the underdog and shining the light on corruption. I'm excited to kind of dig into that in a bit. Tom has covered everything from Hurricane Fran to the Aurora Theater shooting to the Broncos Super Bowl victory party. He's honored to be a storyteller during an unprecedented time in our history. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Great to talk to you, Tyler. Great to be here.
Just reading your bio, you've done so many things and you've been all over the place. So I'm excited to dig into different parts of that. But let's start back at the beginning. Tell me a little bit, where are you from? What was your childhood like? Kind of the early years for you.
Well, let me put it this way. My father was a career naval officer, Naval Academy class of 55. They named a ship after him, the USS Mustin, a few years ago. So he was a big shot in the Navy. He was a 3-star. He passed away last year. But I was born in Monterey, California, sister born in Philadelphia, brother born in Jacksonville, other brother in San Diego. So people go, oh, Navy, right? So we lived all across the globe, but DC, because my father would always come back to the Pentagon. So the DC area, Alexandria, Virginia is where we call home. But I grew up, I remember we'd have the same friends in Hawaii that we'd have in Athens, Greece, because their families were also military as well. Right. So I kind of just learned this vagabond gypsy life and just figured that's what everyone else did. But, you either sink or swim when you have a life like that. So for me, I became very outgoing and asking a lot of questions about people, to people. And so we had this life. And then my last 3 years of high school, we were in Virginia, the DC area. I went to Virginia Tech, and I actually thought that I was going to be a pro football player. That's what I wanted to do. I played two years of football, and then started getting concussions in practice and realized, hey, God made some people 6'5", 350, and that's not me. I'm 6'1", 185. So I started thinking about what else I wanted to do, and I didn't really know. I graduated I had a BS in economics and a minor in English, and everyone said, oh, you'd be great in advertising. And I knew after spending a few winters in Blacksburg, Virginia, that I wanted to be somewhere warm. And we'd lived in Southern California before, San Diego, Coronado. And so I said, well, I'm going to drive out to Southern California. I had some friends out there. And I got a job quickly, a sales job selling little dictation equipment, which you don't even have anymore, little micro cassette recorders. People could talk and take notes to themselves. And, so I was driving all across Southern California, Pasadena, and wherever, selling dictation equipment because all the people in advertising said you need sales experience first. Do this for a year or so, and then you can jump into advertising. Okay. So one day I'm following my crappy little Honda Civic, and it breaks down in the middle of nowhere, Glendora, California. And I got underneath it and plugged up this little oil leak, and I had crap all over me. And I show up at this appointment, and the guy's not even there. And I thought it was a sign from God saying, Tom, this is probably not what you want to do. So I quit my job the next day, went down to Venice Beach in California, and was playing guitar for money. And I was happy as a clam. And I had buddies who went to college who were doing commercials and making a lot of money. I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. I'm in Hollywood. Why not? You only go on once. So I jumped into an actor's class, actor's studio, and got onto, a couple of weeks later, I was on the Guiding Light. No, not the guy. It was Days of Our Lives. I was on Days of Our Lives. And people, it was like, whoa. And then I did Star Trek 4, the movie, and all this stuff in General Hospital. And I was kind of rolling. I thought, this is kind of fun. I love this. I'm 22 years old, and I'm doing movies. I'm meeting Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner. And then all of a sudden, there was a writer's strike, and it hit hard. The Tom Cruises of the world could care less. The Tom Mustins, who needed that money to pay rent, were like, whoa, what am I going to do? So my wife said, you've always loved news, Tom. And I said, yeah, but can you make money at news? And she said, well, let's give it a shot. So I went back to school at night, and this time I had 2 little boys. Went back to school at night at UCLA and got a certificate in broadcast journalism. And it's kind of a lot of long stories here, but when I interned at KABC while I was at UCLA, we hired a professional photographer to shoot our fake stand-ups and news stories, and I used that to put together for a tape and started sending that out back through snail mail back in the day in 1996 to other stations. And I got a call from Charlottesville, Virginia, well place. I thought, Virginia, hey, we live there, and it's not too far from my house. And I dated a girl at UVA, at the time. So I said to my wife, let's go out there. We'll just give it a shot. We'll try. So I went from making a pretty good income as an actor, and I'd also had started a magazine and this and that. But this was $19,000 at Charlottesville, Virginia, doing like overnight cut-ins and this and that. And I thought I was ready. I thought I was used to the camera, and I studied. So the first live shot, I'll never forget this. I was, you have a little IFB in your ear. They're talking to you. They said 30 seconds, and I had my little spiel. I was literally standing out in the field somewhere. And I started hyperventilating, thinking, I can't do this. Oh my gosh. 30 seconds, Tom, 15 seconds. I'm, oh my God, my heart was pounding. And I just kind of blurted out what I was going to say. And after it was over, I was mad at myself. I thought, you know what? All this pressure I was putting on myself, millions of people have done this before, millions of people have done it afterwards. I need to get my act together here. And what I learned was that, you can study all you want, you can go through years of class, but nothing prepares you from actually standing with a microphone knowing that hundreds of thousands of people are watching you. You have to go through that experience once. And then I learned to like that experience, a lot. And so, I did that, and I was there for 10 months in Charlottesville only. Really liked it, kind of learned the ropes. I was awful, but I looked at it like an off-Broadway play, okay? Be awful off-Broadway, but once you get to the big time, be decent. So I got a call from a station in Jackson, Mississippi, a place I'd never thought I'd ever visit, let alone live there. I had all these preconceived notions. And it was a #1 NBC affiliate in the country. And they said, hey, would you like to come down here? So I talked to my wife, and she's like, Jackson, Mississippi? Really? We had 2 kids at the time. Sure. It was a little bit more money, and it was a good station, and a really hard news station. I learned, live shots and this and that. And about 6 months into my stint there, they promoted me to weekend anchor. So I had my first anchor job at the #1 NBC station in the country. So you go to restaurants and people, you felt like you're a celebrity there in Jackson. And at the same time, my little daughter was born. So we had 2 boys and a little girl, and going through this crazy life. I left Jackson after 14 months only because out of the blue, I got a call from Greensboro, North Carolina, a little bit closer to home in Virginia. And it was for a full-time anchor job, a morning show anchor job. And I said to my wife, do you want to go there? And she said, yeah, let's go. So after 2 months at WXLV, they said, the news director pulled me into her office. And I thought, oh gosh, what did I do wrong? And she said, well, we want to make you the main anchor. I want you to do the 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. And I thought, whoa, that's a big move. So I moved quickly to the main anchor job. I was there for 3.5 years. And it was owned by, if you've been following Sinclair Broadcasting, they were owned by Sinclair. They were having some issues at that time. So we heard rumors they were getting rid of the station. They were getting rid of St. Louis and Greensboro and all that. And I thought, whoa, I can't have this happen to me. And almost like divine intervention, Tyler, I got a call from this news director in Denver, Colorado, a place. All I knew about Denver was John Elway throwing touchdowns in the snow. I'd always been a Navy kid living by my coast. But I knew Denver was a good news market, and it was a KCNC. And I thought, I know of this station. It's market 16. I've gone up from market 196 to 86 to 40 to now 16. I'm moving up. And I said to my wife, if we hate it, I'll sign a 3-year contract. We'll go back to wherever you want to do, or I can get into something else. Right. Let's go for it. I always had that go for it attitude. Let's try things. I love new experiences. And she said, and by the way, my father was an Air Force colonel, and some of the best memories of my life was when he used to teach at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And she said, so I love it. I have great memories. So we came out here, and that was 2002, and we're still here. Although I've moved from Channel 4, the CBS affiliate, to the ABC affiliate, and I'm also doing some radio stuff here. But it just was kind of a long and winding road into the news business. And through this time, I saw like the development of the internet. When I first got in, it was, you wanted to do a story, Tyler, you would pick up the yellow pages or the white pages and start making calls, or you go to the neighborhood, knock on doors. That's how you got stories. And you still do to a certain extent, still knock on doors. But now it's so easy, you get on Twitter or whatever, and you just get all your information. And that's a double-edged sword too that we can talk about later. It's you've got to really make sure you vet what you're getting out of there. But for me, it was always, I was an athlete, and I always loved the adrenaline rush of whatever you're doing. And news to me was that feeling. Every day is different. You're talking to President Obama one day, you're talking to John Elway the next day. It's just all different. I've loved that adrenaline rush. And I had a teacher when I was at UCLA who said something I'll never forget. He said, don't ever be frightened, intimidated, or lazy. And I thought, that's good words. You know, he gave me this go for it, you only go around once attitude. Frightened, yes, like my first live shot, I was absolutely terrified, but I pushed through it. And intimidated, you know, you you can only be intimidated if you let yourself be intimidated. You know, I was the guy that always would get there an hour early and stay an hour late just to make sure my web copy was written correctly. You know, and just the secret, if your students ever want to know, you know, what makes you a good broadcaster, what makes you a great athlete, what makes you a good podcast person, what makes you a good spokesperson, it's just bust your butt, work harder than anybody else. The secret to anything worthwhile is hard work, and there's no getting around that. There's all kinds of get rich quick schemes, you know, here and there, but there's nothing like just getting there, rolling up your sleeves, and doing your job and working hard. And that's what I've always tried to do in my career. So, sorry to not let you butt in there, Tyler, but
No.
that's a good way to get started.
Well, that gives me a lot to pull from. I'm really intrigued because as a child, so your father was in the Navy and you moved around a lot, and you mentioned that helped you to become more outgoing. And I
Right.
suspect because even in adulthood, you've moved around a lot, and your kids have had that same experience. Mine too. We moved all over the country. All of my kids were born in different states. And
Right.
a lot of people will look at that and say, oh, you're poor kids. That would be so hard to uproot and move around. But I suspect your experience is similar to mine, that it gave you a lot of advantages in life. Can you talk about some of the opportunities you've had because you were forced to make new friends, try new things, do all that?
Well, I'm sure you've had this experience too. You know, when you live in Wisconsin or when you live in Utah, you think that the world revolves around there. When I was in DC, everyone there, the world revolves around here. When I was in Southern California, the world revolves around here. Then you go overseas to England and Greece and realize not only does the world not revolve around Utah, they don't even think of your country. They think the world revolves around London. Right. And you just get a bigger perspective of what the world is about, and more global perspective. And I think it makes you a more empathetic person. You see different cultures. And you know, when I was in Mississippi, they used to call me the white boy. When I was in England, they called me the Yank. You know, and you realize you're an outsider in some places. And so when we're doing stories about people who feel marginalized because of whatever their situation is, in some small way, I feel like I can relate to them, and I really do try to do justice to their stories.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things, especially recently with Black Lives Matter and thinking more about equality and understanding other cultures, one of the greatest opportunities of my life is I lived in Miami for a while, where I was definitely the minority. I had prejudices against me, and it makes it a lot easier for me to try to want to understand others and to reach out. I'm sure you've had a similar experience as you've been all over the world. Sure. You have a lot more empathy for people.
I do. And I think as a journalist, that's so important, especially nowadays. And, you know, I think it makes you a more well-rounded person. And I think I'm very receptive to listening to other people's ideas. So I think that's helped me as an anchor and as a reporter.
So as you've talked about kind of your journey, getting into news and into journalism, you gave us the highlight reel. Tell us about some of the setbacks and some of the things that went wrong.
Well, you know, one of the things is fairly recently, you know, I was promised a certain position, you know, within a company, and it's just not happening, you know, and you have to understand that's part of the game. You can either whine or complain about it, or take the situation you have and make the best out of it. And that's, you know, that's kind of what I'm going through right now. Not to get into too much politics, but well, let me give an example of something that was unexpected that kind of shaped my life too. I was driving home one day. I was off. It was here in Colorado, and I was driving home, and I heard on the radio there's been a shooting at Arapahoe High School, and they said a shooting in a Douglas County high school. I live in Douglas County, and 3 kids were in the schools at the time. We didn't know which one, and I thought, whoa, I'm stopping right here and listening. Make a long story short, it was Arapahoe High School. I was off, but I was half a block from the station, and I pulled over, and then they started blocking streets off. What happened was I was the only reporter in there where the police were and the families gathering. I ended up cut to the next scene. I'd been there 14 hours doing live shots throughout the day, and you know, going live and doing stories. And that really shaped me, because I realized that, you know, a lot of what you do in your life is just kind of timing and luck. And just speaking with those families about what they were going through, it's something that it was like divine providence that I was happened to be in that area at the time on my day off, and just, you know, being able to share that story. So yeah, it was interesting.
So a lot of kids have expressed interest in understanding different ways of getting onto television and the different roles that you can do. Typically, when we think of television or whatever, we think of Hollywood and being in films and things like that. But as a news anchor, you have a lot of influence, and there's a lot of good that you can do for the world. Talk to us just a little bit about what your job has entailed as being a news anchor, what kind of responsibilities you've had, and just a little bit about that industry.
Well, I think it's like Spider-Man. They said, with great power comes great responsibility, and it's something that you definitely feel that. And my job is to serve as a mentor, especially to some of the younger producers who put the shows together. And they'll give me a script to read, and I rewrite or write everything that I go on the air with because it's my face out there.
Sure.
And our job as journalists is to present both sides and let you, the viewer, decide how you feel about it. If you can see where I'm leaning on a certain subject, I'm doing it wrong. And one of the classic examples I always give is back a few years ago, Katie Couric was interviewing all the vice presidential candidates. It was Joe Biden and Sarah Palin at the time. And it was very subtle. When she was interviewing Joe Biden, they do what are called cutaways when the camera turns to her. And she was going like this with Joe Biden. She was kind of smiling, laughing. And every time they did a cutaway with Sarah Palin, she was like, and she got blasted for that. It was a very subtle little thing, but that's a perfect, remember that? And that's a perfect example of what you can't do as a journalist because your whole life is being impartial and being fair. So I understand it's my responsibility to give both sides to every story. If we're going to do a story bashing the president, we better have a Republican response, or I'm not going to be the guy reading it.
Right.
However you feel about anybody, and that's just a good way to balance things out. So people, I think the reason I've survived this long in this industry is because people understand that I'm fair and I want to be balanced. And I think that's such a big thing as a journalist, especially these days. You need to be credible.
Yeah.
And
now, I would imagine that one of the challenges of being a journalist and being in the news is there's a lot of depressing things. And, a lot of people won't watch the news because they don't want to be drugged down by all those things.
Right.
How do you deal with that personally in dealing with all these stories coming in, and a lot of them are negative? How do you keep high spirits with all that?
Well, that's a great question, Tyler. During the Aurora theater shooting, here, which we've covered ad nauseum for weeks and weeks and weeks, you really get depressed. I mean, you feel, almost like PTSD. I don't want to, it's not even the same league as our brave soldiers out there, but you know what I mean? It's just, you're covering a horrible story, interviewing families who've lost loved ones, and it's just awful. So we actually had a counselor on hand at the station, 24/7. You can go talk to him anytime. I never took advantage of that. I really wish I had have. But what I do, exercise is so important. When I get home, or when I was doing the morning show, I would exercise when I got home. Since I'm at night now, I get up early and go run or hit weights or work out. It's so important for clarity. You have to keep your mind and your body sharp. And that seems to work for me. Or just getting away and go hiking. In Utah, you have great hiking trails. We do here too. And for me, that's my sanity. That keeps me sane. Because when you jump back in the arena again, it's every day is a battle. And it's really hard. Like now, every story for a while was COVID, and that was tough. And now it's COVID and the protests, and it's not a lot of good stuff. So if you can find that little rose that's kind of break through the concrete there every once in a while, it really sustains you for a long time. So if you can do the positive story about someone who's helping somebody else and is changing lives, I love that.
Right.
So.
Well, I can say amen to that. That's what this whole channel is about. I get only positive all the time. It's awesome.
So, I like it. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned earlier that I love is you talked about being there an hour early and staying an hour late. And I think that applies in any area of life. But I especially think as our world changes and as technology changes, there are more opportunities to develop skills. And in fact, I even have my own story in journalism. So a few years ago, I was teaching a class at the university, and I was encouraging my students to start blogging. And they said, well, what are you blogging about, Mr. C? And I wasn't at the time. And so I said, okay, I'm going to find something I'm passionate about. I'm going to start blogging. And so I started waking up at 4:30 every morning to write about my favorite football team. And
who was your favorite football team? Who is that?
BYU, my alma mater's Brigham Young. And so, they've had historically a pretty decent football program.
Yeah.
And so I started writing about that. And I did it every day. I was consistent. I would do it before I'd go to work in the morning. And I stuck with it for a few years. Well, what happened is I became the expert for BYU football recruiting, where every newspaper in the state asked me to be their recruiting analyst. I got media passes to go to the games and be on the field with the players.
Right.
And, you know, my little blog now has over 1 million page views. And I'm not really doing it anymore, but the principle is there that if you take advantage of working early and staying late, doors open up and opportunities come. And certainly we've seen that in your life as you've continued to find opportunities after opportunities. I think the challenge now, and I'd like you to speak to this, is you've had opportunities, but it takes a real leap to leave a job that you've only been at for a few months to do another job and then to continue doing that. And I think we live in a world that is changing and adjusting all the time. What was it that made it so you felt like, okay, I'm going to take this leap of faith again and continue to do that? How did that become part of just how you live your life?
Well, I just felt like I was always looking for better opportunities, you know, and money was one thing, certainly. And then I got to the point when we got to Denver, where the kids were, you know, a little bit older. I thought, okay, and my wife, this discussed with my wife, obviously, we like it here. It's a great, safe area. It offers a lot. Our kids like it here. Before I just, you know, capriciously jumped to Los Angeles to go to market two, what am I going to do? And so we've decided that this is the place we want to be. So we've kind of put up roots here. Although, who knows? I mean, you could call me and say, you need a co-host, and I'd be over there in a second, Tyler. You know, go to beautiful Utah. You know, but I think it's, you know, as you grow and as your life situation changes, you have to reassess things.
Right.
And when I first got into the news biz, I knew I was moving up. It was like going up a step ladder. And so we knew Charlottesville would be a short term. We knew Jackson would be a short term. North Carolina, we thought we might stay for a while, but then other circumstances came in and we moved here. So I think you just have to be open and receptive, and also trust your gut. You know, trust, will this be better for me? Am I doing this for ego, or am I doing it to really, and especially when you have a family, you have to really kind of factor them in as well. I'm never happy here, so that's why I stayed.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, any final thoughts or words of advice to the kids watching this? If they want to have a long, happy, fulfilling life, what's like one thing that you say, make sure you do this thing?
I would say, don't ever let anybody tell you you can't do anything. You know, I had no ties at all to the news business. I just would watch it and think, I'd love to do that. And I made it happen. Don't take no for an answer. Work harder than everybody else. Get off your butt and make it happen. And you mentioned this too, Tyler. This is a true story. This is something my wife has impressed me. We have this time now where we're quarantined at home. Instead of watching the latest episodes of Dexter and try to finish Oz or whatever else, sit down and listen to a book or read a book, some kind of self-help book. I've tried to knock out a couple a week, and it really just keeps your positive frame of mind, and that'll give you the jump. When this whole thing ends, you will be hitting the ground running, and your friends are going to be kind of find their way again. But work hard, play hard, and just, you know, go for it. Like Nike says, just don't take excuses.
Great advice. Thanks for being on the show with us today, Tom.
My pleasure, Tyler.